Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Israel, and this is Parashat Lech Lecha. Walk it out. Genesis 12 to 17, and this one is called Trial by Fire. So let me just start with a warning. There's going to be a lot of reading in this one, okay? As you can no doubt tell by the time of the video, the runtime of the video. I'm going to be reading a lot of the Midrash and the book of Jasher, and the reason is to properly introduce the man of grace, Ish Chesed, who is called the father of our faith, the friend of God, and the father of many nations, Abraham. So, you ready for this? Great, let's go. What makes a story good? You need a hero, a protagonist. And then there's you have character development. But how does one develop their character? In the stories, in the movies, in the books, wherever. Only when one is tested. Through antagonists and various trials and obstacles, heroes are not born, they're made. They are refined in fire, and if they manage to make it out, they shine, they glow, and they are magnificent. And so this story will be told in godly fashion, as we have seen thus far since creation, in the form of order out of chaos. Here comes the chaos. And Cush begot Nimrod. He began to be a mighty man in the land. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord, therefore it said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. Okay? וכוש ילד את נמרוד, הוא החל להיות גיבור בארץ, הוא היה גיבור ציד לפני השם, על כן יאמר כנמרוד גיבור ציד לפני השם. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babylon, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, and in the land of Shinar. ותהי ראשית ממלכתו בבבל וערך ואכד וחלנה בארץ שנער. From that land emerged Ashur, Assyria, right? And he built Nineveh and Rehoboth, Ir, and Calah. So we discussed last week when God confused the tongues of the people, Ashur, Assyria, who went on to build Nineveh, right? Who later on got a visit from Jonah. So we got Ashur, Shem, and Noach. They were the only ones who remained speaking Hebrew at the time. But what about Nimrod, right? We shall rebel. You want to see chaos? Reshit mamlachto Bavel. The beginning or the start of his kingdom was confusion. Bavel is confusion, i.e. chaos, tohu vavohu. Look at this. Babel is indeed called Babylon, but it means a form of chaos. And on to the next. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord, therefore it said like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. How did this happen? That he had anything to do with the same God who he was trying to rebel against. And Cush, the son of Ham, the son of Noah, took a wife in those days in his old age. And she bare him a son, they called his name Nimrod, saying, at that time the sons of men again began to rebel and transgress against God. And the child grew up, and his father loved him exceedingly, for he was the son of his old age. We hear this a lot also, that Isaac was Ben Skunav, the son of Abraham's old age. Joseph was the son of Jacob's old age, and there's a special love for them in that regard. And the garments of skin, now listen up, the garments of skin which God made for Adam and his wife when they went out of the garden were given to Cush. After the death of Adam and his wife, the garments were given to Enoch, who walked with God, the son of Jared. And when Enoch was taken up to God, he gave them to Methuselah, his son. And at the death of Methuselah, Noah took them and brought them to the ark, and they were with him until he went out of the ark. And in their going out, Ham, remember Ham, the father of Canaan? He stole those garments from Noah his father, and he took them and hid them from his brothers. And when Ham begat his firstborn Cush, he gave him the garments in secret, and they were with Cush many days. And Cush also concealed them from his sons and brothers. And when Cush had begotten Nimrod, he gave him those garments through his love for him, and Nimrod grew up And when he was 20 years old, he put on those garments. And Nimrod became strong when he put on the garments. And God gave him might and strength, and he was a mighty hunter in the earth. Yea, he was a mighty hunter in the field, and he hunted the animals and built altars. Now look, and he offered up them, the animals, before the Lord. And Nimrod strengthened himself, and he rose up from amongst his brethren. And he fought the battles of his brethren against all their enemies round about. And the Lord delivered all the enemies of his brethren in his hands, and God prospered him from time to time in his battles. From time to time in his battles, and he reigned upon the earth. So at this point in time, Nimrod is the king of the world. Okay? He's the king of the world. So, how did Nimrod become a mighty warrior before God? He wore the very same garments that God himself had woven for Adam and Eve. But what was so different about these garments of skin? It's a little confusing, but remember when God created man, he was physically perfect, not spiritually. Adam and Eve were beings of almost pure light. There was still a little bit of the physical in them. How else could they exist in the Garden of Eden, a spiritual place outside of space and time? Doesn't make sense if you think about it. And so just like they were beings of light, so was the serpent, another being of light. He didn't look all nasty or whatnot. Satan doesn't come at you with horns and a pitchfork and a tail. You know, it's something very beautiful and very attractive, very appealing. But when they all fell, they all changed. When God was going to send Adam out into the physical world, he surely would have ceased to exist, because a purely spiritual being cannot exist in the physical world. In other words, you're going to die. So what did God do? He gave them skin. The first skin ever made, not through birth, but by God's hands. And what is the purpose of skin if not to cover your insides, right? But what were Adam and Eve's insides? Think about this. In the Garden of Eden, their insides were heavenly light. And in order to counter heavenly light, they had to cover the heavenly light to exist in this fallen world. In order to counter heavenly light, or rather conceal it, the skin that God made for them would have to be powerful enough to not only sustain them in this world, but to help them thrive and have strength to live and work the land. These were super suits, if you will. Now remember, the flesh is weak, but the spirit is strong. And they cannot equally coexist, exactly. While man was created originally with made of 99% light and 1% physical, he would be turned into 1% light, the spirit, and 99% physical. This is what we are today. And thus, this is our lives. The higher we get, the more of the physical world we leave behind by default. Think about it. Or rather, the more we leave this physical world behind, the higher we get. That's the right way to look at it. So because Nimrod put on those specific clothes, he became master of the earth and of all physical things. In other words, he almost completely blocked out any kind of remnant of spiritual connection to God that he had within him. And he possessed the power of Adam, in a sense that he would call to the animals and they would come and then they would submit to him. This is what happened. And that's how he was a mighty hunter. I feel like some buffalo today, you know, and he got the buffalo call or something. I don't know. But then how was he able to vanquish his enemies? And Nimrod became strong when he put on the garments, and God gave him might and strength, and he was a mighty hunter in the earth. Yea, he was a mighty hunter in the field, and he hunted the animals, and he built altars, and he offered them up, the animals, before the Lord. When you show God respect, it doesn't matter who you are, he returns it twofold. So what happened? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And he set over his subjects and people, princes, judges, and rulers, as it is custom amongst the kings. And he placed Terah, the son of Nahor, the prince of his hosts, and he dignified him and elevated him above all his princes. Terah, as in, yes, this is Terah, the father of Abraham. The father of Abraham was the number 2 guy in all the world at the time, just like Joseph was to Pharaoh. And just like evil rises, God creates good to abolish it. But in this case, like all of God's perfect creation, and Terah, the son of Nahor, prince of Nimrod's hosts, was in those days very great in the sight of the king and his subjects. It says the same thing about Moses. He was very great in the eyes of all the Egyptians. Same thing about Joseph. And the king and the princes loved him, and they elevated him very high. And Terah took a wife, and her name was Amthello, the daughter of Cornebo. And the wife of Terah conceived and bare him a son in those days. Terah was 70 years old when he begat him. And Terah called the name of his son that was born to him Abram, because the king had raised him in those days and dignified him all above all his princes that were with him. But even this right here is not the beginning of Abraham. As we had discussed briefly 2 weeks ago during Parashat Bereshit, order out of chaos, we read in Genesis 2. Ele toldot hashamayim va'aretz behibar'am beyom asot Adonai Elohim eretz v'shamayim. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created on the day that the Lord God made earth and heaven. So, you notice how in this verse, this is Genesis 2:4, it starts with hashamayim va'aretz, the heaven and the earth, and then it ends with eretz v'shamayim, earth and heaven. It starts off like this, and then it continues like this. And whose name is right there in the middle? Behibar'am. That means it's an anagram of in Avraham, Be'avraham. The rope that ties heaven and earth right there in Genesis, just like we discussed. Now, stop me if this next part sounds familiar. And it was in the night that Abram was born, that all the servants of Terah and all the wise men of Nimrod and his conjurers came and ate and drank in the house of Terah, and they rejoiced with him on that night. Congratulations, baby born, baby boy. And when all the wise men and conjurers went out from the house of Terah, they lifted up their eyes towards heaven that night to look at the stars. And they saw, and behold, one very large star came from the east and ran in the heavens and swallowed up the 4 stars from the 4 sides of the heavens. And all the wise men of the king and his conjurers were astonished at this sight. And the sages understood this matter, and they knew. And they said to each other, this only betokens the child that has been born to Terah this night, who will grow up and be fruitful and multiply and possess all the earth. You're damn right. He and his children forever, and he and his seed will slay great kings and inherit their lands. And the wise men and conjurers went home that night, and in the morning all these wise men and conjurers rose up early and assembled in an appointed house. And they spoke and said to each other, behold, the sight that we saw last night is hidden from the king. It has not been made known to him. And should this thing get known to the king in the latter days, he will say to us, why have you concealed this matter from me? And then we shall all suffer death. Therefore, now let us go and tell the king the sight which we saw, and the interpretation thereof, and we shall then remain clear. And so they did. And they all went to the king and bowed down to him to the ground, and they said, may the king live, may the king live. We heard that a son was born to Terah, the son of Nahor, the prince of thy host. And we yesternight came to his house, and we ate and drank and rejoiced with him that night. And when thy servants went out from the house of Terah to go to our respective homes, to abide there for the night, we lifted up our eyes to the heaven, and we saw a great star coming from the east. And the same star ran with great speed and swallowed up 4 great stars from the 4 sides of the heavens. And thy servant was astonished, servants were astonished at the sight which we saw, and were greatly terrified, and we made our judgment upon the sight, and knew by our wisdom the proper interpretation thereof, that this thing applies to the child that is born to Terah, who will grow up and multiply greatly and become powerful and kill all the kings of the earth and inherit all their lands, he and his seed forever. There are ways to know all these things. And now, our Lord and King, behold, we have truly acquainted thee with what we have seen concerning this child. If it seems good to the king to give his father value for this child, we will slay him before he shall grow up and increase in the land, and his evil increase against us, that we and our children perish through his evil, right? The villain is the hero of the other side of the story. And the king heard their words, and they seemed good in his sight, and he sent and called for Terah. And Terah came before the king. Now, this is extremely symbolic and telling as far as what Abram would later be shown by God, as in on earth as it is in heaven. So Nimrod tells Terah to bring his son before him so he could slay him. And Terah, he comes up with every excuse not to do this. I'm skipping over pages and pages right now. Nimrod was getting really angry. Basically, he threatened Terah and he said, listen, if you don't hand him over to be killed, I'm going to take you out. I'm going to kill your wife, your other sons, your horses, and your dog, and all your servants and whatnot. In other words, I'm gonna wipe all you guys out. Give me the boy. So Terah asked for 3 days to think about it, and he was granted 3 days by Nimrod. He's like, okay, fine. I'll bring him to you in 3 days, or I'll give you my answer in 3 days. And the king hearkened to Terah, and he did so, and he gave him 3 days' time, and Terah went out before the king's presence. And he came home to his family and spoke to them all the words of the king, and the people were greatly afraid. And it was in the 3rd day that the king sent to Terah, saying, send me thy son for a price as I spoke to thee. And shouldest thou not do this, I will send and slay all thou hast in thy house, so that thou shalt not even have a dog remaining. Yep. And Terah hastened, as the thing was urgent from the king, and he took a child from one of his servants with his handmaid, and had borne to him that day. And Terah brought the child to the king and received value for him. And the Lord was with Terah in this matter, that Nimrod might not cause Abram's death. And the king took the child from Terah, and with all his might dashed his head to the ground. For he thought it had been Abram, and this one's concealed from him from that day. And it was forgotten by the king, as it was the will of providence not to suffer Abram's death. Okay, get that? Took the baby by the head, crushed his skull on the ground. Nimrod, good guy. And Terah took Abram his son secretly, together with his mother and nurse, and he concealed them in a cave, and he brought them their provisions monthly. And the Lord was with Abram in the cave, and he grew up, and Abram was in the cave 10 years. And the king and his princes, soothsayers and sages, thought that the king had killed Abram. So while Abram was being raised in a dark cave, his older brother Haran gave birth to Lot, Milcah, and Sarah. Okay, so now we see the birth of Lot and Sarah. Haran was 42 years old when he begat Sarai, which was in the 10th year of the life of Abram. And in those days, Abram and his mother and nurse went out from the cave, as the king and his subjects had forgotten the affair of Abram. So now we know that Sarah was Abram's younger cousin, and he was, 10 years her senior. And when Abram came out of the cave, he went to where? Where did he go? He went to Noah and his son Shem, and he remained with them to learn the instruction of the Lord and his ways. And no man knew where Abram was, and Abram served Noah and Shem his son for a long time. And Abram was in Noah's house 39 years. And Abram knew the Lord from 3 years old. And he went in the ways of the Lord until the day of his death, as Noah and his son Shem had taught him. So at this point in time, Abram is 49 years old, right? We got the 10 years in the cave, and we got the 39 years in the house of Noah. Now ask yourselves this. How can it be that a 3-year-old child knows the Lord? Okay, it said he knew him since he was 3 years old. If even at this very point he's 49 years old, God has yet to speak to him. How could it be that he knew the Lord? Before he even met Shem and Noah to say, hey, there's a creator in all these things. 3-year-old boy. The answer is that he never took anything for granted. And he was constantly searching for he who made all things. Sometimes we forget about God in our busy day to day, But when we take a trip, if you go on a road trip or if we go for a long drive, for a swim out in the ocean or out in the lake, if we move away from civilization that man built, roads, trains, buildings, or the concrete jungles that most of us live in today, what we see is nature itself in all its glory. Now, Abraham was hiding in a dark cave, in the dark for 10 years. Perhaps he had never seen the light of day. Can you imagine feeling the warmth of the sun on your skin for the very first time? Try and picture that. Try and feel that for a second. Go outside, just let it hit you. Close your eyes, take a breath. How about the smell of spring when the flowers bloom? Or the first dip in cool waters of the river, the ocean? When you leave civilization, by default, you become more spiritual because you are away from the material things as you connect to that which has not been touched by man or corrupt by man, if you will. So during Simchat Torah, we had a very special prayer. We do this every year. We say Tfilat HaGeshem. This is the prayer for rain. And from that point on until the first day of Passover, when we pray for rain to stop, that's when the dew begins, okay? And oddly enough, it's like clockwork every year. We pray for rain, within 3 days, it rains. And then Passover, we pray for it to stop raining, and it stops raining. Why do we pray for this on and off rain? Because last time, flood days, and it started to rain, and it didn't stop for a very long time. And yeah, there was stuff going on. Anyway, the dew, as we learned, is what watered the earth before the flood. So while the rains were what came after. So the prayer that we say now 3 times a day during the Shmoneh Esrei, we say Mashiv haruach u'morid hageshem, which translates directly to he who returns the winds, haruach, mashiv, lashuv, tshuva, to come back, to bring back the ruach, the winds, and bring down the rain. Umorid, lehorid, laredet, yered, right? To bring down geshem. To bring down the rain is another Hebrew class. However, there is another simple yet fascinating way to read this verse. Check this out now. He who increases the spirit, the ruach, while decreasing the physical. Geshem also comes from gashmiyut, which means worldliness. Did you understand what I just said? Mashiv haruach umorid hageshem. Bring back the spirit and blot out or lower the worldliness, the materialism. Because Abraham was hidden from the world for the first 10 years of his life. He had this innocence about him. He was not corrupt. Now, do you see how God works? God made sure that it would be known to Nimrod that Abraham was born on that day, and that one day he would destroy his kingdom. And when I say Abraham, I mean the kingdom of heaven. And when I say Nimrod, I mean the fallen world. Do you understand? Reshit mamlachto, as in, that's what we read about Nimrod, just like Bereshit, bara Elohim. Do you see this? Thereby enabling him to return the spirit to this world while simultaneously suppressing the physical worldliness. Perfect plans come together. And this is what the Tower of Babel signified. It was man's creation, built specifically with the intent to defy God. Look at how glorious we are. Look at what we can do, man can do with my own strength. And all those sons of the earth in those days greatly transgressed against the Lord. And they rebelled against him and they served other gods. This is after the flood. This is right now. This is in our story right now. And they forgot the Lord who had created them in the earth. And the inhabitants of the earth made unto themselves at that time every man his god, gods of wood and stone, which could neither speak, hear, nor deliver. And the sons of men served them, and they became their gods. And the king and all his servants and Terah with all his household were then the first of those that served gods of wood and stone. That's what happens when you take Abraham out of your house. This right now is the timeline during the Tower of Babel. And all that generation were wicked in the sight of the Lord, and they said thus, and they thus made every man his god, but they forsook the Lord who created them. And there was not a man found in those days in the whole earth. Again, this is like right before the flood. Who knew the Lord? For they served each man his own God, except Noah and Shem and his household. And all those who were under his counsel knew the Lord in those days. And Abraham the son of Terah was waxing great in those days in the house of Noah, and no man knew it, and the Lord was with him. So still, Abraham was 49 years old, and he was constantly searching for God. Who did all this? It's one of the stories when he was 49, it actually said that he was, he's examining every single thing in nature, and he went out and he saw the sun. He goes, wow, when the sun comes up, there's light, everything lives, all the plants come to life, the flowers and everything gives warmth to the earth. It's amazing. This must be the God. So he worshiped the sun until it set. And then what came out? Then the moon came up. He goes, no, surely this is God. And then the moon set. He's like, okay, it's neither of you. You understand? This is how he did it, through the process of elimination his entire life, until God said, how you doing? So he grew up in Noah's house, and he was taught the ways of the Lord, but that never stopped him from going out and searching for himself. As I have been teaching you, my friends, okay? Your relationship with the Creator is your own. You want to be like Abraham? Okay. Then never stop seeking. Because the more you know about God, the more you realize just how much you don't know. When you become complacent, there will be destruction. Learn from this. But when you seek, will you not find? So after the Tower of Babel happened and was destroyed, and in the 15th year of the life of Abram, of the life of Abram, son of Terah, Abram came forth from the house of Noah and went to his father's house. And Abram knew the Lord, and he went in the ways of his ways and instruction, and the Lord his God was with him, the Lord his God. And Terah his father was in those days still captain of the host of King Nimrod, and he still followed strange gods. So Abram comes home, he comes back to civilization for the first time in 50 years. Okay, he's 50 years old right now. And what does he see? He's coming to his parents' house. And Terah said to his son, behold, these are they which made all thou seest upon the earth, and which created me and thee and all mankind. His father, Abram's father, is telling Abraham, see these 12 statues? He had like one really big one. He was like the chief statue, and another 11 little ones. All these are our gods. They made you, they made me, they made all the things that you're seeing right now. And Terah bowed down to his gods. And he then went away from them, and Abram his son went away with him. Abraham could not believe his eyes. The entire world, as well as his own parents, are worshiping sticks and stones? Surely they know better than this. Why are they doing this? We still got the generation of the flood over here. What is going on? And Abram viewed them, and behold, they had neither voice nor hearing, nor did one of them stretch forth his hand to eat the meat. Now, his mother prepared the food, and Abram's like, hey, can I get it? And she's like, nah, they're for the statues, or they're for the gods. So he's like, all right. And he placed it before him. He says, let's see what's going on. And in the evening of that day, in that house, Abram was clothed with the Spirit of God. In other words, what happens next is God directing his hand. Now, all of us today might be looking back at them, okay, back then, and say, we would never do this, just like we are so quick to judge the generation of the wilderness, right? We wouldn't do this because obviously we would know better. Now, you think that's any different than what the entire world is doing today? Okay? We all have the information of the entire world in our pockets, in our cell phones, right? That's what we have, all right? And what are we doing with our cell phones? If someone who just came out of the rainforest or something, or some other secluded place in the world, and they walked into civilization today and they just took a look around, I don't know, they might think that we're the crazy ones. You see what I'm saying? If the whole world is bowing down to statues, you grow up thinking that that's what's normal. Again, I'm old enough to remember what it was like before cell phones. We still had those, those dial-y ones at home, but now cell phones and all the generation, everybody's like this the whole time. That's what everybody's doing. It's kind of creepy and kind of crazy, but we're being conditioned to fall into this. That's why you have to wake up. And it was because Abraham was segregated that he was able to see the difference clearly. That's why God segregated him from birth. This is what the psalmist is talking about in Psalms 115. Their idols are silver and gold, the handiwork of man. They have a mouth, but they do not speak. They have eyes, but do not see. They have ears, but do not hear. They have a nose, but they do not smell. Their hands, but they do not feel. Their feet, but they do not walk. They do not murmur with their throat. Like them shall be those who make them, all who trust in them. Israel trusts in the Lord. He is their help and their shield, right? Israel betach b'Adonai izram u'maginam hu. The first blessing that we say in the Shmoneh Esrei is Baruch atah Hashem magen Avraham, the shield of Abraham. We bless God for being the shield of Abraham. Right? Who's Abraham's shield? It's God. The creator of the universe is the personal shield of Abraham and his seed. So Abraham's being as wise as he was, he smashed all his father's idols with like an axe or a hatchet. Some say it was like a torch. And then he placed it in the hands of the largest one that he left standing over there. When his father heard all the ruckus and everything, he ran into the room. He goes, "What have you done to my gods?" And Abram was like, "Dad, I saw the whole thing. He did it." Right? That's what he said. To which his father replied, "Is there in these gods spirit, soul, or power to do all thou told me? Are they not wood and stone? And have I not myself made them? And canst thou speak such lies, saying that the large God that was with them smote them?" To which Abraham replied, "Uh-huh." And Abraham answered his father and said unto him, "And how canst thou then serve these idols in whom there is no power to do anything? Can those idols in which thou trustest deliver thee? Can they hear thy prayers when thou callest upon them? Can they deliver thee from the hands of thine enemies? Or will they fight thy battles for thee against thine enemies, that thou shalt serve wood and stone which can neither speak nor hear? And now surely it is not good for thee, nor for the sons of men that are connected with thee, to do these things. Are you so silly, so foolish, or so short of understanding that you will serve wood and stone and do after this manner? And forget the Lord God who made heaven and earth and who created you in the earth, and thereby bring a great evil upon your souls in this matter by serving stone and wood. Whew! Did not our fathers in days of old sin in this matter? He knew Noah, he knew Shem. Hey, what brought about the destruction of the world? Oh, you mean the same stuff we're doing now? Yeah, gotcha. Oh, but there's a rainbow, so God's not going to do that again. Don't worry about it. And how can you continue to do this and serve gods of wood and stone who cannot hear or speak or deliver you from oppression, thereby bringing down the anger of God of the universe upon you? Now therefore, my father, refrain from this, and bring not evil upon thy soul and the souls of thy household. And Abram hastened and sprang from before his father and took the hatchet from the largest idol. He broke the idol and ran away. Oh, wow. Yeah. So anyway, we're going to fast forward a bit, but all you need to know is that Terah was so angry at this that he actually went and he ratted out his son to Nimrod, and he told him the whole story, like from the beginning, the deception and everything. So as in like what happened 50 years ago. So at this point, Abram is now brought before Nimrod, who was king over the whole world at the time. And the king said to Abram, "What is this that thou hast done to thy father and to his gods?" And Abram answered the king in the words that he spoke to his father. And he said, "The large God that was with them in the house did to them what thou hast heard." And the king said to Abram, "Had they power to speak and eat and do as thou hast said?" And Abram answered the king, saying, "And if there be no power in them, why dost thou serve them and cause the sons of men to err through thy follies? I mean, it's like, what do you do in this situation? Picture yourself in Abram's shoes right now. The whole world has just gone mad, but they know the truth when you call them out. So what happens when you call out a person with the truth? Dost thou imagine that they can deliver thee or do anything small or great that thou shouldest serve them? And why wilt thou not sense the God of the whole universe, who created thee and in whose power it is to kill and keep alive. O foolish, simple, and ignorant king, woe unto thee forever. Forever, ever, forever, ever. I thought thou wouldst teach thy servants the upright way, but thou hast not done this, but hast filled the whole earth with thy sins and the sins of thy people who have followed thy ways. Okay, so basically what's happening right now is Abraham stood up to the most powerful and ruthless man in the world, and in front of all his servants and princes, he insulted his intelligence, questioned his leadership, and just all out rebuked him. He refused to bow down to Nimrod's statue or bend to his will. And why did he do this? Because compared to God, Nimrod was nothing. God stood with Abraham against the entire world, and Abram won. Now what happens next was that Abram was thrown into prison. Again, skipping over, he's thrown into prison for 10 days while they could decide what to do with him. Okay, so the decision was basically, okay, you know what? We're going to build a gigantic furnace, and we're going to let it burn, heat up for 3 days and 3 nights, 3 full days and nights, and then we're going to toss Abraham into it and have him burn for his crimes. When Nimrod asked his father why he lied to him back then, he told him the truth. He said, listen, I didn't want you to kill my son, okay? So he's like, all right, fine, but I'll kill him now. It's like, yeah, you should kill him now. Okay, no problem. So now he threw his other son, Haran, under the bus because he said it was his idea. It was like, you know what? It was his idea. He was 29 at the time. He's the one who told me to deceive you. He's like, oh, okay, bring him too. And Haran at the time felt inclined to follow the ways of Abram, but he kept it within himself. And Haran said in his heart, now listen up. Listen up, all you people on the fence. Behold, now the king has seized Abram on account of these things which Abram did. And it shall come to pass that if Abram prevail over the king, I will follow him. But if the king prevail, I will go after the king. In other words, if Abram doesn't make it out alive, he's like, that was not my idea, and he'll bow down to whatever statue he wants. And when Terah had spoken this to the king concerning Haran his son, the king ordered Haran to be seized with Abram. And they brought them both, Abram and Haran his brother, to cast them into the fire, and all the inhabitants of the land, and the king's servants and princes, and all the women and little ones were there, standing that day over them. Now, there were about 900,000 people at that point in time. Almost 1 million people were watching what was about to happen. And the king's servants took Abram and his brother, and they stripped them off of their clothes, except for their lower garments, which were upon them. And they bound their hands and their feet with linen cords. And the servants of the king lifted them up and cast them into the furnace. And the Lord loved Abram at this point, and he had compassion over him. And the Lord came down and delivered Abram from the fire, and he was not burned. But all the cords with which they bound him were burned, while Abram remained and walked about in the fire. Oof. And Haran died when they cast him into the fire, and he was burned to ashes, for his heart was not perfect with the Lord. Which means that Abram's heart was. And those men who cast him into the fire, the flame of the fire spread over to them, and they were burned. And 12 men of them died. And Abram walked in the midst of the fire 3 days and 3 nights. And all the servants of the king saw him walking in the fire. And they came and they told the king, saying, behold, we have seen Abram walking in the midst of the fire. And even the lower garments which are upon him are not burned. But the cord with which he was bound is burned. And when the king heard their words, his heart fainted, and he would not believe them. So he sent other faithful princes to see this matter. And they went and they saw it and told it to the king. And the king rose to go and see it. And he saw Abram walking to and fro in the midst of the fire. And he saw Haran's body burned. And the king wondered greatly. And the king ordered Abram to be taken out of the fire, and his servants approached to take him out. They could not, for the fire was round about, and the flames ascended towards them from the furnace. Now, just from reading this right now, it would seem that this is not earthly fire, necessarily, that Abram's in at this point. See what I'm saying? And the king's servants fled from it, and the king rebuked them, saying, make haste and bring Abram out of the fire, that you shall not die. And the servants of the king again approached to bring Abram out, and the flames came upon them and burned their faces, so that 8 of them died. And when the king saw that his servants could not approach the fire, lest they should be burned, the king called to Abram, O servant of the God who is in heaven, go forth from amidst the fire and come hither before me. And Abram hearkened to the voice of the king. And he went forth from the fire and came and stood before the king. And when Abram came out, the king and all his servants saw Abram coming from before the king, with his lower garments upon him. For they were not burned, but the cord with which he was bound was burned. And the king said to Abram, How is it that thou wast not burned in the fire? And Abram said to the king, The God of heaven and earth, both places, whom I trust, and who has all his power, as in, it's not a little, he's got all of it. It's all his. He delivered me from the fire into which thou did cast me. And Haran, the brother of Abram, was burnt to ashes, and they sought for his body, and they found it consumed. And Haran was 82 years old when he died in the fire of Kasdim. And the king, princes, and inhabitants of the land, seeing that Abram was delivered from the fire, they came and they bowed down to Abram. Wow, do you not see this as being a sign of what's going to happen at the end of days? When the nations are going to try and wipe us out, and in the end what's going to happen? Read the prophets. And Abram said to them, Do not bow down to me, no, but bow down to the God of the world who made you, and serve him. Grab in the tzitzit, teach us your ways, because we heard that you know the Lord. And go in his ways. What are his ways? Teach us. For it is he who delivered me from out of this fire, and it is he who created the souls and the spirits of all men, of all you out there, and formed man in his mother's womb, and brought him forth into this world. And it is he who will deliver those who trust in him from all pain. And this thing seemed very powerful in the eyes of the king and princes, that Abram was saved from the fire, that Haran was burnt. And the king gave Abram many presents, and he gave him his 2 head servants from the king's house. The name of the one was Oni, and the name of the other was Eliezer. And all the king, Eliezer. And all the kings, princes, and servants gave Abram many gifts of silver and gold and pearl, and the king and his princes sent him away, and he went in peace. And Abram went forth from the king in peace, and many of the king's servants followed him, and about 300 men joined him. Okay, so we got that. And Abram returned on that day and went to his father's house, he and the men that followed him, and Abram served the Lord his God all the days of his life, and he walked in his ways and followed his law. Law means law, kids. Yeah, we'll get to that in later portions. And from that day forward, Abram inclined the hearts of the sons of men to serve the Lord. Okay? Just like Enoch. Enoch that's exactly what he did. That's why they made him king over the whole world. That's why God took him. He had a lot of work to do. So now this story is very reminiscent of Daniel chapter 3, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, right? Nebuchadnezzar spoke up and said to them, who's them? It is my decree, meaningless, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not worship my God, and that you do not prostrate yourselves to the golden image that I have set up. Now behold, you are destined at the time that you hear the whistling horn and so on and so forth, to fall and prostrate yourselves to the image that I made. And if you do not prostrate yourselves at the time that you shall hear all these goodness things and whatnot, I shall cast you into a burning fiery furnace. And who is a God who will save you from my hand? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, Nebuchadnezzar, we do not care to answer you about this matter. It's like, oh no, they didn't. Yes, they did. They knew about Abraham. Behold, there is our God whom we worship. He can save us from the burning fiery furnace and from your hands, O king. He'll save us. And if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we will not worship your God, neither will we prostrate ourselves to the golden image that you have set up. Tosses them in the fire. They're walking around. And what does it say then? It says, Then these men were bound in their cloaks, their trousers, their robes, and other garments, and they were cast into the burning fiery furnace. In view of this, since the word of the king was urgent and the furnace was heating excessively, these men who had brought up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were killed by the spark of fire. And these men, the three of them, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell into the burning fiery furnace, bound. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was bewildered and stood up in haste. He shouted and said to his leaders, "Did I not cast 3 men into the fiery furnace, bound?" They answered and they said, "Yeah, it is true, King." He called out and said, "Behold, I see 4 men walking in the midst of the fire, and there is no wound upon them, and the 4th looks like Bar Elohim, looks like a son of God." So what's that all about? Okay, so Bar Elohim, Bar means son, Elohim is God. But don't get excited now. Bar Elohim basically means angels. Where do we know this? We know this from Genesis, and we know this from the book of Job. Okay, and it refers to the angels. Okay, most likely, I mean, we don't know who it is. It could have been Metatron, it could have been Michael, it could have been Gabriel, it could have been any other angel at the time. But the angels are referred to as the sons of God. And also, it's a reference to the kings. Anyway, yeah, there's a lot you guys don't know. Then Nebuchadnezzar approached the gate of the burning fiery furnace. He shouted and said, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the servants of the Most High God, step and come out." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the midst of the fire. And the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the leaders of the king gathered and saw these men in the fire and took no effect in their bodies and all this goodness. And they said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and rescued his servants." See, the Aramaic says, "Dai shalach mal'acha." Maza malacha? From malach, which is an angel. So Bar Elohim and malach are interchangeable over here. Malach, by the way, also means emissary, messenger. Okay, let's go to then the king made Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego prosper in the capital city of, where is this? Babylon. Yep, a lot of people get thrown in the fire in Babylon. So, would you like to know why they were saved? Did they know that they were going to be saved? No. Were they, pretty certain that they were going to die? Yup, because that's what happens when you get thrown into the fire. Behold, there is our God whom we worship. He can save us from the burning, fiery furnace, and from your hands, O king. He will save us. If not in this world, then in the world to come. But that's okay because, and if not, in other words, whether he does it or not, let it be known to you, O king, that we will not worship your God. Neither will we prostrate ourselves to the golden image that you have set up. You understand? They gave their lives to not bow down to a statue. That's what they did. And that's why they were saved, because their heart was pure, just like Abraham. And I'm sure they knew the story of what happened to Abraham. But regardless. So at this point in time, Abraham is 52 years old. Now, Parashat Lech Lecha, our Parsha, it begins when he was 75 years old. Okay, I'm filling in 75 years right now from Abraham's life. So we still got 23 years more to go until we catch up. So that night when Abraham walked out, Nimrod had a nightmare. That he was standing before the fiery furnace, which he had built to burn Abraham. He dreamt that Abraham basically walks out of the fire. He has a sword. He draws his sword and he starts chasing Nimrod. Nimrod runs away. He runs into a river. Abraham throws an egg. The egg splits open on his head. That becomes a river. And so it's a convoluted dream. We're not going to get into it because we don't have enough time. Okay. Anyway, he wakes up and his advisors again advise him to kill Abraham. He tells him, listen, I got this crazy dream. So Abraham coming out of the fire. Okay, yeah, let's go kill him. Eliezer overheard this and he goes and he warns Abraham, who then hides in Noah's and Shem's house for a month when he tells his father this. Because again, his father fled with him too. Now they're all together. Abraham was redeeming his father's home because of who he was. Now therefore, hearken to my voice. He explains to his father all the things that had gone down and everything that was happening. Now therefore, hearken to my voice, and let us arise and go to the land of Canaan, out of the reach of injury from Nimrod, and serve thou the Lord, who created thee in the earth, and it will be well with thee. And cast away all the vain things which thou pursuest. What are you pursuing? And Abram ceased to speak, when Noah and his son Shem answered Terah, saying, True is the word which Abram hath said unto thee. They knew some stuff too. And Terah hearkened to the voice of his son Abram. And Terah did all that Abram said. For this was from the Lord, that the king should not cause Abram's death. And where were they headed? And Terah took his son Abram, and his grandson Lot, the son of Haran, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, the wife of his son Abram, and all the souls of his household, and went with them from Ur-Kasdim to go to the land of Canaan. And when they came as far as the land of Haran, they remained there, for it was exceedingly good land for pasture, and of sufficient extent for those who accompanied them. And the people of the land of Haran saw that Abram was good and upright with God and men, with God and men, because you can't have one without the other. And that the Lord his God was with him. And some of the people of the land of Haran came and joined Abram, whatever, you'll figure it out. And he taught them the instruction of the Lord and his ways. And these men remained with Abram in his house, and they adhered to him. And Abram remained in the land 3 years. So how old is he right now? 52, 3 years. He's 55 years old. He didn't enter Israel yet. And at the expiration of 3 years, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, this is the first time God appears to Abraham, okay? He's 55 years old. And what does he say? I am the Lord who brought thee forth from Ur-Kasdim and delivered thee from the hands of all thine enemies. And now therefore, if thou wilt hearken to my voice and keep my commandments, my statutes, and my laws, then will I cause thy enemies to fall before thee. And I will multiply thy seed like the stars of the heaven, and I will send my blessings upon thee, all the works of thy hands, and thou shalt lack nothing. Arise now, take thy wife and all thy belongings to thee, and go to the land of Canaan, and remain there. And I will there be unto thee for a God, and I will bless thee. And Abram rose and took his wife and all the belongings, and he went to the land of Canaan, as the Lord had told him. And Abram was 50 years old when he went from Haran. Abram was 50 years old. No, he was not. Abram was 55 years when he went from Haran. And Abram came to the land of Canaan and dwelt in the midst of the city, and he there pitched his tent among the children of Canaan, inhabitants of the land. And the Lord appeared to Abram when he came to the land of Canaan, and said to him, this is the land which I gave unto thee, and to thy seed after thee forever. And I will make thy seed like the stars of the heaven, and I will give unto thy seed for an inheritance all the lands which thou seest. Do you hear what's happening right now? This is from the book of Jasher. This is from the Midrash. When was the first time that God says this to Abraham? And Abram built an altar in the place where God had spoken to him, and Abram there called upon the name of the Lord. At that time, at the end of 3 years of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, in that year Noah had died, which was the 58th year of Abram's life. He came when he was 55. He dwelt there for 3 years. Noah died. Abram's 58. And all the days that Noah lived were 950 years, and he died. And Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, he, his wife, and all his belongings to him, and all those that accompanied him, together with those that joined him from the people of the land. But Nahor, Abram's brother, and Terah his father, and Lot the son of Haran, and all their belongings to them dwelt in Haran. So it was just Abram, Sarah, and their peeps. Everybody else, his father and brother, they were out there. Now, there's a great war between Nimrod and Chedorlaomer. Who was Nimrod's general before God confused the languages. And Nimrod loses. He goes back to Babylon in shame. If you'll excuse me, my throat is dry. And it was in the 15th year of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, which is the 70th year of the life of Abram. So now he's 70. We're getting close. And the Lord appeared to Abram in the year that he said to him, I am the Lord who brought thee out of Ur-Kasdim to give thee this land for an inheritance. Now, therefore, walk before me and be perfect and keep my commands. For to thee and to thy seed I will give this land for an inheritance, from the river Mitzrayim unto the great river Euphrates. And thou shalt come to thy fathers in peace and in good age, and the fourth generation shall return here in this land and shall inherit it forever. And Abram built an altar, and he called upon the name of the Lord who appeared to him. And he brought up sacrifices upon the altar to the Lord. Now, do you hear what I just read? Why did God mention the generations? This right here is the covenant of the pieces. Yes, it is Genesis 15:16. It's in our Parsha. And the fourth generation will return here. For the iniquity of the Amorites will not be complete until then. So this is how the book of Jasher ties into the Tanakh. And it's what happened, this right here is what happened in the covenant of the pieces. We could see it in 15:5 and 6. And he took him outside and he said, please look heavenward and count the stars if you are able to count them. And he said to him, so will be your seed. And he believed in the Lord and he accounted it to him as righteousness. So we've discussed this theory before about, I think it was about a month ago, that Abraham was not only taken out of his tent, but rather he was taken outside of space and time so that he could see the stars from above the stars. Now get this, that's exactly what our sages confirm here. So listen up. What do they say about Vayotze oto achutza? He took him outside, or he led him outside. They say this, it is not usual for people to be able to view the stars from inside their houses until they have stepped outside. Okay, great. The reason the Torah needs to use this description of what transpired when God spoke to Abram is because up until now, the level of prophetic visions he had enjoyed was the one called Beit El, as in like the house of God. David said in Psalms 45:14, had referred to the level of prophecy, i.e. intimacy with God, as Kvoda bat melech pnima. Pnima means inside. The glory or the entourage of the king's daughter consists of her remaining inside. Now that Abram was going to experience prophecy of a higher level, God had to mention that he took him beyond the level of Beit El, i.e. outside or beyond that level. This is the meaning of the word vayetze. Now our sages say in Masechet Shabbat 156, understand these words to mean that God removed Abram's fate from the influence of the horoscope. Okay, where's the horoscope? It goes according to, like, you know, the stars, i.e. astrological limitations. When he said to him, Habet na hashamayma, look, please look skywards, or something like sky, whatever. Yeah, that. Whenever we encounter the expression habet, it means looking down. If Avram had been on earth and had looked at the sky, the stars, the expression habet would have been inappropriate. Do you understand what is going on here? Therefore, the Torah wanted to tell us that God had placed Avram in a position above the stars and had told him to look down at the sky. Look down at the sky. He could henceforth trample the limitations imposed on a person due to his horoscope. And this is, by the way, children, where we get the saying, Ein mazal leIsrael. Israel has no luck. Doesn't mean that we're unlucky. It means that it's got nothing to do with us. We're not governed by the stars or by the signs in the sky like the rest of the nations. Every single nation has their own planet, has their own star. I believe that Rome is Mars, right? The god of war, blood red, that's Rome. But rather, we are protected by who? The shield of Abraham, God himself. Another confirmation of what we just learned is this. In verse 12, Now the sun was ready to set, and a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and behold, a fright, a great darkness was falling upon him. Is it even possible to see the stars whilst the sun is in the sky? No, which means this all happened during the day. Okay. So, this verse is showing Abraham, or Abram here, he's showing all the things to come and the conditions in which his seed would inherit the land. It says that these four words, where it says a great darkness was falling upon him, Ema chashcha gdola nofelet alav. Okay, Ema chashcha gdola nofelet alav, nofelet, falling on him. And here a great darkness was falling upon him. Here Avram received a hint of the four exiles the Jewish people would endure in the course of their history prior to the final redemption. Final redemption, Messiah sits in Jerusalem, that's it, it's over. So Bereshit Rabbah 44:17 interpreted each of the following words as referring to a specific exile. The word Ema is an allusion to Babylon, terror. The word Chashcha alludes to Medes, that's darkness. The word Gdolah, which is big or large, refers to Greece. And the word Nofelet alav, is falling upon him, is a reference to the exile under the Romans. So, what is the actual covenant of the pieces, which is what's happening right now? We're in it right now. Now it came to pass that the sun had set, we're continuing, and it was dark, and behold, a smoking furnace and a firebrand which passed between these parts. Vayhi hashemesh ba ve'alta haya ve'hine tanur ashan ve'lapid esh asher avar ben hagzarim ha'ele. So what parts? The animals that God told Abram to cut in half and have them lay down on the ground facing each other. Now this is important. You have to understand how people used to make covenants back in the day. This was relevant for the times back in the day. Both parties would basically take an animal, and if they wanted to make a covenant, right? Let's say two opposing kings or neighboring kingdoms. They wanted to make a pact between them. So they would take an animal, they would cut it in the middle, separating the pieces, making covenant of the pieces, and each one of them passed in between. And they said, if either of us breaks this covenant, breaks the word of peace, may I be cut to pieces like this animal. That's how they used to make agreements and deals and covenants back in the day. So that's why this is relevant. Okay? Okay. Now you can ask the question that has been asked plenty of times and is brought forth plenty of times by various different, cults and pagan religions or offshoots of, whatnot, some of which I don't even see worthwhile mentioning anymore, but I'll give you a hint. It sounds like metastatic journalism. They will claim that, oh, look, since God was the only one who crossed through the pieces, that means that he will hold to the end of his bargain on his side. But since Abraham didn't cross through, he will then receive Abraham's punishment or the punishment of the children of Israel for breaking the covenant, and God will be torn to pieces. Okay, so that's some wonderful and borderline anti-Semitic thought right there. So come on here, buddy, and let me learn you something. Tanur, furnace, Hebrew, Canaan, do you speak it? You think that God gives out freebies? Do you think that you are owed anything? Are we reading the same book? You think God, in this case, the form of Tanur, crossed between the pieces because he thought Abram was cute? Where do we see Tanur in our story? And the king's servants took Abram and his brother, and they stripped them of all their clothes, excepting their lower garments which were upon them. And they bound their hands and feet in linen cords, and the servants of the king lifted them up and cast them both into the Tanur. Thank you. And the Lord loved Abram. There we go. And had compassion over him. The Lord came down and delivered Abram from the fire, and he was not burned. But all the cords which bound him, they were burned, while Abram remained and walked about in fire. So let me ask you this. Who gave their life for the namesake and sovereignty of the Lord? Who was the one who walked about the fire and didn't burn? In the covenant of the pieces, this is where God completed his half of the accord. You want to be part of this covenant? Have you walked in the fire for the name of God? Would you? Be very, very, very careful calling yourselves the seed of Abraham, okay? Lest you get tested and fail. But wait, it gets better. Our sages say that at first glance, one would think that the Torah should have written Ashan Tanur, the smoke of the furnace, instead of Tanur Ashan, instead of the other way around. This is the way the Torah describes a similar phenomenon at the time the Jewish people received the Torah at Mount Sinai. At that time, the Torah wrote, Vayal Ashno Ke'ashan Hakivshan. Its smoke, that of the mountain, rose like the smoke from a furnace. This is in Exodus 19:18. The word Tanur alludes to it when you exchange the letters in the word on the basis of reversing the letter of the alphabet. Meaning, what do I talk about? The aleph and the taf, okay? The aleph is the first letter, the taf is the last letter. Bet is the second letter, and shin is the second to last. And then we have gimel and resh and so on and so forth. So if you take the word tanur and you put it into this formula, if you will, which is kind of like a code, you get the word tron, okay? Now this word is derived from Metatron, the force designated by God to run his universe. Oh my God. Tron. Tron? Jeff Bridges is the creator, and he created Tron to create a world in his image, and there are users and programs. Is Tron a biblical story? I need to watch Tron again. So Tron, good Lord, okay. New revelations all the time. The furnace is the receptacle which receives the fire. And as such, it symbolizes the female force. On the other hand, I gotta see Tron. Okay, I'm sorry. On the other hand, the words lapid esh in our verse represents the masculine force. This is the reason the Torah used the masculine form when describing this lapid esh, torch of fire, as aval ben hagzarim, the torch of fire, the masculine, having passed between these pieces. This was not the same force as that represented by the furnace itself. The Torah should have written avru, plural, instead of avar, singular, if these forces had been identical in gender. Remember, everything we're learning, there's male and female counterpart. This is also the deeper meaning of the words Karat Hashem et Avraham Brit, et Avram Brit. God concluded a covenant with Avram. The idea is that God made the Shekhinah, the glory, which represents the covenant, pass between the pieces. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, Abraham is the one who started the covenant, and God was the one who concluded it. Abraham already gave his life for God. And that wasn't even going to be his biggest trial. So as the seed of Abraham, God has every right to come to you and ask, what have you done for me lately? What are you going to say? I believe? Right. Show me the money. Show me your deeds. What's the currency of God? Abraham knew this very, very well. 12:5. And Abraham took Sarai his wife and Lot his brother's son and all their possessions that they had acquired and the souls that they had acquired in Haran, and they went to go to the land of Canaan, and they came to the land of Canaan. This is from our parsha. Ve'et hanefesh asher asu. Nefesh asher asu. Asu is made. Oh, the kids that they made? Did they make kids? No. Abraham was a godly magnet. He converted men, Sarah converted women. It's only in the merit of Abraham that you even have an audience with God. Do you understand this? Who do you think you are? Who do I think I am? It's because he went through all the things that he did. Respect. So the 6,000 years that we have from creation to completion for the 6,000 years of the world, it's divided into 3 stages. The first being the age of tohu, of chaos. The second 2,000 years is the age of Torah. And the third is the Messianic age, the age of Mashiach. So we know that Abraham was born in the year 1948 from the creation of the world, right? Then, 1948 creation of the world. And when he was 52 years old, he stood up for the name of God. And after, he walked through the fire. Remember? When he took his first steps towards the land of Israel, before God even spoke to him, and it was the year 2000. In other words, meaning that as soon as he began to walk in the right direction, as soon as he put his life down, that was the year 2000. That was when the next 2,000 years would come. That's when the age of chaos had ended, and Abraham ushered in the age of Torah. The following 2,000 years, this is when Israel would become a nation. We would receive the Torah, we would enter into the land of Israel, and then there would also be the first and second temple would be built and destroyed, and also you got the 4 exiles. So the destruction of the second temple and our exile by the Romans signifies the end of the Torah age and the beginning of what? Of the Messianic age, which means that we are currently living, and almost for 2,000 years, we're currently living in the age of Mashiach, okay? So now, who knows exactly the day and the hour that Mashiach is going to take his throne in Jerusalem? Nobody, okay? Nobody knows, and because nobody's supposed to know. That's why our calendars were actually confused because of the exiles. And again, this is by design. And why is this by design? Because by the year 6,000, time's up. We know that that's it. And God is like very, very precise. He's not early, he's not late. He's right on time because he made time. So how close are we to 6,000? Now, I've discussed this before in teachings, I don't remember. But according to our current calendar, we go by the year 5780, right? Which means we have 220 years left. However, all the sages would agree that since the Babylonian exile, our calendars have been thrown off by 184 to 186 years. And we know this, okay? Which means that we might very well have between 34 to 36 years left until the end of the Messianic age, which means from this very second up until 34 to 36 years from now is the time of the end. We believe, but we don't know the day or the hour. So don't forget what needs to happen before Messiah actually takes his seat. We were given the perfect amount of time to correct the original sin from the Garden of Eden. This is done retroactively through tshuva, the power of repentance, of lashuv, to return to God. So you see, you think we're moving forward in time, but we're actually moving back in time. Try and understand this concept. And all this is done by the Son's correction of the sins of the Father. Just like every time we follow God's instruction, we correct our father Adam's lack of following instruction. He did the one thing that, boom, and every little thing that we do, we put all the pieces back together. We are putting back the kelim, as in the shvirat kelim that happened, the shattering of the vessels. Each and every mitzvah is another piece. Why do we do this? Making him whole again, thereby making us whole again. Now look at verse 27 in chapter 11, back in Parashat Noach. And these are the generations of Terah. Terah begot Abram, Nahor, and Haran begot Lot. Ve'ele toldot Terach, Terach holid et Avram. Right? Last week we established that only the righteous have their names mentioned twice in a row. Right now, it also says Haran, but then it says Veharan. The Ve is an and. That doesn't count. It's Terach, Terach. See it Terach twice here without any spaces in between. So, how could this be? Was he a righteous man? No, he was an idolater. But look who his son is, and it says it in the same verse. And these are the generations of Terah. Terah begot Abram. And Abram wasn't even his firstborn child, but he begot Abram. He's the most significant child. Because he begot Abraham, he was able to do tshuva in the end of his days, and he died a tzaddik according to God. Do you see this? Do you see the potential of tshuva? And the Lord said to Abram, Vayomer Adonai el Avram, Lech Lecha, me'artzecha, mimoladetecha, umibeit avicha el haaretz asher are'eka. Go forth from your land and from your birthplace and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. My son, I have chosen you before you were born. But since you were born, you have been searching for me. Here I am. I need you to get out of all that which is corrupt. Distance yourself from the darkness and give yourself room to spread and shine bright. From your land, me'artzecha, from your earthly desires. Eretz is the land. From all your earthly desires, from your earthly birthplace. You have no roots there. Your roots are with me. From your earthly father's house. I am your father. I am your father. Yes. Start walking in that general direction and I'll just tell you when to stop. This verse sums up the life of Abraham. That way, okay, what? You'll let me know. No problem. Okay, tell me when to stop. It's all good. God told him that his offspring will be a great nation, but that he himself during his lifetime would be looked after. And I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will aggrandize your name, and you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you. God spoke to Abraham very few times throughout his life, but Abraham knew God because he saw him everywhere, in all things. He was searching constantly. See, Abraham was essentially a regular guy. He struggled, he stumbled, he fell, and he got back up. And that's what counts. But he was the guy because he never stopped searching for God his entire life. He always tried to do the right thing according to the word of God to the best of his ability, which is what I'm trying to tell you, which is what I need to tell myself, okay? I fall often, we're people, we're human beings, we're flawed, but you just have to try your best and never get discouraged. God's always there. It's you, the one that distances yourself from him. He's always there ready and waiting. It doesn't matter how bad you screwed up, you can always come back and do tshuva. Please don't ever forget that. That is the power that makes the world go round, of you returning, because that's what's going to happen ultimately. Wow. So, how do we know this? That his heart was pure, that he went not because of the reward that God had promised him, but because he truly wanted to serve. How do we know that this is why he went? God just promised him everything. Is that why he went? Verse 4. Vayelech Avram ka'asher diber elav Adonai. And Abram went as the Lord had spoken to him. In other words, as according to God had spoken to him. Meaning his heart was just as God had intended it to be, as done through the choice and his own free will. God had a lot of intentions. Obviously, he knew what would happen. But this is what he intended, and this is what Abraham did. His own accord, his own free will. So you have to understand this, my friends. If you choose to walk with God, you're gonna be tried by fire. You might even get burned. But have no fear, because this is only earthly fire, created by God himself to test you, so that you will know where you stand. This is for you. Abraham needed to know where he stood with God at all times, which is why he was constantly tried. Do this. If you wholeheartedly pray to God, ask him to know him and to know his ways. And if you do this with humility and, again, wholeheartedness, I promise you what comes next is going to be a trial, because that's how you're going to know God. Because it's not about what the trial is, but how you act in order to get through it, how much trust and faith you have in God to get you through it. It's all about what you do or don't do. We all, as Jews and Christians and Muslims, we look at Abraham as our father. And it all leads back to him. He was known for his love of people. Even pagans, they were simply uneducated until they entered the tent of Abraham. The tent of Abraham was always open on all four sides, signifying the four winds, the four corners of the earth, the four pillars of colored fire, and the four spirits of Messiah. Oh yes, there are four. The more we get to know this man, the more we see that the way Abraham honored God, the creator of all things, was by loving and honoring people, God's greatest creation. Abraham was the very first convert. Don't ever forget that. And anyone who dwelt in his tent knew God. The tent of Abraham acted as a soul catcher in a dark world as he ushered in the age of Torah. Now, I want you to go and read Parashat Lech Lecha now that you have all this information. I hope you gain knowledge and wisdom and understanding regarding Avraham Avinu. And know that we got this introduction. Now that we got this introduction out of the way, now wait till you see what happens next week when Abraham faces his greatest trial, which would solidify an eternal covenant between us and God. A good story is one that has a hero. Then there is character development. But how does one develop their character? Only when one is tested through antagonists and various trials and obstacles. Heroes aren't born, they are made. They are refined in fire by fire, and if they manage to make it out, they shine, they glow, and they are absolutely magnificent. My friends, thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of the week and a Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.